More reaction now to the government's proposed industrial relations reforms. We're taking you live to Canberra. The Labor leader, Anthony Albanese, is taking questions.
Voting for legislation that cuts workers' pay.
You didn't answer Phil's question, though, Mr Albanese. The government argues that this will affect only those. I'm actually asking you, Mr Albanese.
It's just a clause.
Okay. The question was, the government argues it affects only those companies who can demonstrate that their business has been affected by the pandemic. Why is that not a fair argument in your view?
It's not what the bill says. Because the bill doesn't say that. And by the way, companies have been affected by the pandemic.
Can you confirm that your red lines are the same as the ACTU, that it's not just the changes to the Better Off Home test that you propose, but also job security changes that relate to casuals, misclassified casuals not being able to get back pay, and the Greenfields, 8-year Greenfields agreements? Those are all red lines. Labor won't vote for a bill with those in it.
Look, the test that we propose is the one that I've restated today. So there was a more detailed test from the ACTU, but they go to the same points, which is whether or not it's delivering secure jobs with decent pay. Now, some of these other issues we'll now work through the detail now that we have it. But just to give a very simple answer with respect to the casuals example. Now, what's here, any employer, the concept of a casual becoming part-time, you can drive a truck through how easy it is to get out of that under what's here. And even if an employer somehow was caught to run foul of the rules that here, there's no remedy, because you only get arbitration if it's by consent from the employer. And how many vulnerable casuals do we honestly think are going to say to their boss, well, I'll now take you to the Federal Court of Australia? So there's problems throughout the bill. That's why we need the inquiry process on that to work that through. But the boot test, you can look at it straight away with what they've done today, because what Andrew put in the question, can I say, it's not what the bill says. The bill doesn't even say the impact of COVID-19 has to be negative on the business. It doesn't refer to turnover or anything like that. It just says there has to be an impact on the business. So I'd suggest that have a look at the difference between what the government says and what they announce and what they've delivered here.
Could you insert, you said you're going to oppose the clause outright, but would there be any scope, and I know it's early days, to amend it, to actually to quantify, like the turnover test that qualified businesses for job, for example?
Look, it is early days. It is early days with respect, Phil. We've had the legislation for a period of a very short period of time. We will have a process to examine detail, but we've indicated very clearly what our test is and what our bottom line is very clearly here today. The fact is the government could have included us in the process. They chose not to. They could have provided us with an advance of the legislation. They chose not to. This government chose to say one thing as part of that process that was established with unions and employers, and then introduced legislation that did not reflect the consultation process. And the government itself has conceded that that's the case, that they never raised these issues at any time. So with respect, we'll take time to look at all of the detail, but we've very clearly indicated that the removal of the principle that we want workers to not be able to have their pay and conditions cut, such as the provisions which we've outlined today, are unacceptable.
Can I just follow up, Mr Albanese? The Minister said that 4 such agreements with Grant were passed during the Labor government under the exceptional circumstances test you introduced. Is it not possible, rather than, can you not salvage this amendment by actually codifying the criteria for hardship rather than leaving it to the discretion of the business owner of the field?
The reason why so few accessed it previously was because the rules were so tight. What the government's announced today effectively opens it to every business in Australia and delivers a pay cut. And what then happens to the good employer when their competitor takes advantage of this? This is inviting a race to the bottom. It's saying that workers don't become part of a recovery.
Mr Burke, can I ask you about the boot test? Now, interpreted by the Fair Work Commission to mean, a few years ago, after it was introduced, that every single individual had to be better off overall. You've had people inside Labor, including Nick Champion, saying that that was a terrible interpretation that's caused all sorts of grief to enterprise bargaining. Paul Keating happens to agree. Where do you stand on the boot? Should it be about all workers as a whole or every single worker?
You're talking about a change that not even the government's proposed here. What they're proposing is every single worker can be worse off. That's what they presented today. I don't accept the Keating comparison, can I say? I just don't accept it for the same reason that Sally McManus gave at the National Press Club. You can't pull out one element of the entirety of the industrial relations system under Paul Keating and say, well, Labor used to have that, why can't you now? The better off overall test coming out of a pandemic, can I say, there is no way we are going to support a situation where workers are getting pay cuts. We're not.
Okay, one more.
Mr. Albanese,
Last one.
the government is essentially this issue designed to top up to help businesses so that they're not laying off. Do you not buy that in that essence?
No, I don't buy that. Just like I don't buy the fact that this government has presided over stagnant wages since it came to office. It's something that's characterised it. Something that also is characterised by this government is that they never miss an opportunity to try to cut wages and conditions of working people. And this is yet another example. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, a pretty clear position there from Labor's Anthony Albanese when it comes to the government's industrial relations reform proposal.